just onside this Sunday. It's the last game of the season. Bit of an anticlimax, one would say, but it is the final game. So we'll talk about the final day. How are you, Ois?
I'm doing good, thank you, Ayub. Doing wonderfully well. Sunday afternoon here, well in the afternoon, it's near 3 p.m. But I'm doing good. How are you? I imagine you watched the game yesterday, Ayub. The playoff final, or at least caught quite a bit of it. That could have been obviously Leeds participating in that game, and this was probably one of your biggest nightmares, wasn't it, Ayub? That Leeds would find themselves in the position of
Mm.
Sheffield United. What did you quickly just make of the game, and obviously just the emotions with what was ultimately a last minute winner for Sunderland?
Gutted from a personal point of view, and I'll explain briefly the reason why. Uh, with us being in the Premier League, I'm looking at trying to be better than three teams. Uh, I was pretty confident that if Sheffield United went up, we'd be better than them because they've got, I don't think one of the best coaches. He's a good, solid coach, Wilder, but he's not one of the best coaches, especially in the top flight. Uh, who Sunderland have, Regis Labrie. I think he's a really, really good coach. He's a European coach, obviously. I think he'll be able to attract better players. He has Sunderland playing a nice brand of football, and he's done wonders at Sunderland. On top of that, Sunderland are a big club. If you look at the fan base, it's 40 plus thousands in the championship. So they would be much more of a threat. So from a personal point of view, I was gutted. But it was a typical sort of championship affair. Wasn't a great game in terms of skill, but I think Sheffield United be absolutely kicking themselves. They should have won that game. They should have been out of sight. I mean, there was a goal disallowed, which I think was probably fair, but there was a chance just before
Mm.
Sunderland equalise. I think it was Andre Brooks, clean through. Uh, some people say it was a great save. I thought it was a poor finish. He should have finished it. But there's a reason why he's playing in the championship. But Wilder, I don't think Wilder will survive. I think they'll get rid of him. But slightly disappointed from that point of view. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I probably I don't see a huge difference between Sunderland and Sheffield United. I think both teams would have been favourites to go down, and Sunderland will be favourites to go down. They officially start as the worst team in the league. I mean, that's fair enough. In the Premier League, obviously a Northeast derby next year with Newcastle and Sunderland. I do just very quickly. If you remember, we discussed this. So you just before, when we were heading into the final 6 or 7 games. I'm not a huge fan of this type of scenario where ultimately I get it. It's an entertainment game. It's an entertainment industry, but you have to be careful that that doesn't stray into the kind of bring in the integrity of the game into kind of question. I mean, I just feel as though 46 games is time enough to determine who the best teams are in the league. Now, I get why they do it because ultimately Wembley needs to be paid for, and ultimately this draws in a lot of fans. No doubt, I imagine both sets of fans probably sold out their area. You'll probably correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the allocation with two pretty decent fan bases, as you mentioned. But 14 points was the gap between Sheffield United and Sunderland. Sheffield United were a lot closer to the two teams that went up than to the other three that made it into the playoffs. And you saw that in the first legs as well with Sheffield United. I've always felt as though the third place team, if you want to do it this way, where you need to have some sort of playoffs, third place team should automatically get to the final because there should be some advantage for the third place team. Or alternatively, the final, if it gets to it and they get to it, they have home advantage in the final. Now, they'll say from an entertainment perspective, the big showpiece game needs to be played at Wembley for all types of reasons, which I'm not stupid and oblivious to. But I just think there has to be some advantage because
Mm.
the third place team and the sixth place team start at the same point after 46 games, and I just don't understand it. Both teams get to play home and away. So from my perspective, it just leaves a little bit of taste. Now, some will say, well, win the game. Yeah, but over 46 games, they were much better than Sunderland. And across maybe 49 games or whatever, they were still better than Sunderland, if you count the two games. So for me, just I'm not entirely comfortable with how
Mm.
it all plays out. To that, you say what?
It's you make a good point. It really is a valid point. I mean, I like the format in terms of playoffs. I think it does add excitement. Plus, it keeps the season much more interested. I mean, obviously, I talked at the top of the show about uh, the EPL being a anticlimax, and it has been an anticlimax because it's a foregone conclusion. So certainly the concept of playoffs I like. Maybe perhaps it needs to be reviewed as to how you do that and how you make it fairer, because in a sense, the third team or the third place team has absolutely no advantage. And it's you have to have some sort of fairness. So maybe perhaps have a goal advantage. So maybe sort of third and fourth team have a goal advantage, or the team that finishes third has a goal advantage between the team that's fourth, maybe fifth as well, and maybe sixth team they have two goal advantage. I don't know how. I mean, there needs to be something. You're right, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of these where I think it does add excitement. Do you want to have some sort of advantage? Uh,
Yeah.
but in one sense, it would seem fair that you are rewarding a team that's been consistent throughout the whole year. It's a team could sneak into sixth place, uh, but then to start on parity, perhaps. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, but it's one where I think you make a valid point, and I think it's one where perhaps somebody does need to sit down and think, right, can we find a system that, in some ways, doesn't penalise? Because in a sense, there is a penalisation for the team that finishes third.
Yeah, exactly. I just think I'm not a big fan of in-game leads, let's say a lead being given, because otherwise it's one of those situations where you say, okay, well, who scored the goal? I'm thinking about from statistics point of view, from a historical point of view, statistically, to just say you get a goal. I just think the third place team should get some material advantage. Now, it's less of an issue when third, fourth, fifth, and sixth is, let's say, split between 4 or 5 points. I'd say, well, there's not a huge great deal between them. But when there's 14-point gap, which is shy of 5 wins between third and fourth, again, the integrity of the game would suggest that you find some advantage. Again, I don't mind the third place team being automatically the playoff final. Some might argue, well, they still would have lost the game then because Sunderland would have got through. Well, would Sunderland have got through? That's the question I would ask because they might have had to go through a slightly more difficult process. I'm just saying it just
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
seem fair. And don't forget, if Sheffield United get through automatically to the playoff final, they can rest. They don't have to worry about
yeah,
playing two
absolutely.
games, so they get the benefit of rest. I'm just saying they should have some advantage, especially when you have a chasm, because ultimately Burnley, Leeds, and Sheffield United, there wasn't much between them. And then the other three, yeah, they started, and obviously Sheffield United now across through 49 games still had more points than any of the others, yet won't be playing in the Premier League. I find that a little bit just perhaps undeserved.
I mean, it's one of these where maybe it could have been uh, where the gap wasn't that big. So what do you do when the gap isn't that big? So it has to be a rule which, irrespective of whether it's a large lead or a small lead, there's a certain consistency and people are on board. But I think you make a really valid point because it is something which is a bugbear of perhaps a number of supporters whose teams have finished third with a huge lead. They've just missed out on automatics. And then they've got to go through this process. Maybe perhaps what you do is the teams that finish third and fourth, it's rather than a two-legged affair, it's a one-legged affair and it's home advantage. So
Mm.
perhaps that then gives advantage to at least, or at least it incentivizes teams to finish higher up rather than
True.
just sneaking through the six. So
Yeah.
it's something that I'm sure can be discussed by those who are interested in the championship. I'm not interested in the championship anymore, at least for one season.
It's
So
definitely for one season.
yeah, yeah. Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's talk about. I mean, we'll have a little chat about the Premier League a little bit later on, but let's talk about a massive, massive game. I mean, we did a little preview on our last show, Spurs and Man United. I mean, I was thinking that perhaps Man United might edge it, but the Spuds came out on top. A massive victory. Maybe I mean, I actually did say that even if Spurs win, that the Ange will be sacked. I think looking at what's been happening over the last few days, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Ange will start the season. He seems cock a hoop. The Aussie is in good spirits at the moment, he appears. He's obviously brought trophies or a trophy to a club which is bereft of trophies. So, what's your thoughts on sort of where these teams go? I mean, certainly from the Spurs position to be in the Champions League is a huge, huge boost to that football club. For Man United, I mean, I'm a loss. I'm at a loss to see where this team goes now. So, what's your thoughts on the game and where each team now will feel they're at.
Yeah, I mean, the firstly the game. We should probably just cover that uh, albeit briefly because it wasn't much of a game in terms of the quality. Difficult game. Obviously, I was watching it from kind of 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. So I was really struggling with work the next day. But I decided to watch the game. Focused a lot more in the last 25 minutes. Yeah, I mean, look, the finals are for winning. It's not for necessarily performing well. They are for winning. Look at Sheffield United yesterday, as we discussed. So ultimately, these big games are for winning. It wasn't best of quality, but I remember Liverpool against Spurs. If you remember in the Champions League final at the Atletico Stadium, I think that was one of those unique seasons where I think 3 weeks had passed since the Premier League had ended. So there was, I guess, the players were given perhaps too long a break. And I remember the quality of the game was quite poor. Liverpool obviously winning 2-0 in the end, but yeah, I mean the game was poor, but Spurs in the end get the goal. Again, a bit of an ugly goal to be fair. And Ange Postecoglou, you mentioned the word cock a hoop, and he was, wasn't he? And this has become this narrative, this comment, this claim of his of always winning something in his second season has taken a life of its own. And look, if you remember, you when they were when he was appointed, there was no bigger fan than I was in terms of just the way he came across early on. I think he's had a much tougher season, obviously, this year in terms of balancing that. A lot of injuries. And it's been a rough season, hasn't it, Ayub, in terms of
Mm.
where they are right now in the season, in the Premier League table, 17th. I mean, just above the three teams that are fighting for or have been relegated. Look, amazing victory, great for the Spurs fans. It's a trophy. It's, to your point, an avenue, a route into Champions League. Now, for me, it doesn't matter so much about the Champions League itself because Spurs are way adrift of ever challenging for that trophy, at least for the foreseeable future. What it does allow them, hopefully, is to be able to reinvest that money wisely to increment or to provide an increment to the talent within the squad, and that's what Ange Postecoglou will be most looking forward to. Can they attract the type of player that's going to take them to the next level? Because aside from another Europa League run, if they drop out of the Champions League next year, you would say they are rank outsiders of qualifying for the Champions League for the year after. So it's not just about qualification, is it, Ayub? You want to get yourself, and I've been consistent on this, to a position where you can A, challenge at the top of the table and B, challenge for the Champions League trophy in and of itself. So Spurs are way adrift of that. I think you've got to be careful about reducing your aims to simply Champions League qualification. If you can use that as a springboard to improve the squad, improve the standing within the team, the personnel, etc., then great. You're right. It looks like Ange is perhaps going to stay. I'm still not sure. Maybe perhaps he's also a little bit fed up about the challenges that he's having to face at Spurs, which is that A, they are the most profitable football club in the country, but not sure that's going to appease fans when they're languishing in 16th or 17th or wherever they are. So it's been a very unusual season for them. I think, again, a trophy is a trophy. They had, I think, a great parade. I think it was on Friday. But a lot of fanfare. I thought the post-game interaction between James Maddison and Roy Keane was funny. But that's all good banter, as they say. Now, just on the other side of the ledger, you just very quickly. I have again been pretty bullish about Amorim. I like him as a coach. I like his honesty, perhaps too honest, some would say. But I prefer that rather than some coach just being very vanilla about his comments. I prefer somebody who's a bit more emotional, speaks well. So what if he comes across as naive? He tells you, suggested that I don't need any compensation. Fire me if you want. Uh, Trust me, he won't be foregoing that compensation. But no, I mean the fact of the matter is that he's going to be there at Manchester United next year, and he should be. But the worry I have, are you very quickly now, just kind of reading the landscape that is Manchester United right now, you really struggle to see what that route is in terms of back to the big boys. That I just cannot see it. There's nothing I can articulate that would be genuine to suggest that Manchester United can get back in amongst the big boys in the near future. There is zero avenue other than perhaps to rip it up and sell a few players, raise maybe 150, 200 million if you get rid of a Fernandez, a Mainu, perhaps even obviously Garnacho. I wouldn't get rid of Ahmad. He's too important, I think, right now in terms of the potential he has. But they may well do that. And if they do that, they are definitely taking a couple of steps back for the immediate short term. A couple of steps back would be relegation, to be honest with you, given where they are. But I just don't see what the route is. Are you no Champions League football next year, no European football next year. Yes, they'll have more time on the training ground for Ruben Amorim to start implement some of his methods. But I mentioned to you previously, the ceiling for this club, in my opinion, next year is ninth, and I'm being kind. And that's not just to do with Manchester United, that's to do with the other football clubs that are run in a much better position, that will have a bit more financial power. Don't forget, you, it's not just the European football that gives you additional revenues, it's also your league standing and positioning that gives you additional revenues as well. You see what some of the big boys are doing already in this transfer market, whereas United, all the talk is about is Fernandes going to Saudi Arabia, is Garnacho leaving, so yeah, a difficulty. Yes, Cunha. There's rumours about him coming in, but surely that's to supplement some of the good players that they already have. If yourself Fernandez, I mean, that is a huge blow for the United fans who have had all too many blows this season. So United, I'm not sure what the route is. I'm not sure what the pathway is. What I do know is they should stick with the coach because I don't see where sacking the coach is going to get you. As for Spurs, big moment for the club, big moment for the fans. Amazing to win the trophy. Deservedly so, although United were knocking, no doubt, at the back end of the game, but finals off winning. And Ange Postecoglou, amazing story. Does he stay? Difficult to tell. You believe he will stay. What's giving you that kind of feeling that he will stick around for this third season, where you still think they will struggle somewhat?
I think it's just it's the vibe that seems to be emanating from Spurs now. I think it's just there's such a feel good factor, and I it just sort of looks as if it will be difficult to get rid of him now. Uh, sort of converse to that is it may be a great opportunity for Ange to leave. He might sort of say, well, look, my stock has suddenly risen. So maybe this is perhaps a better opportunity for me to leave. But just going back to not the game, but the outcome. Uh, you've got two clubs with sort of decent profiles. I mean, obviously Man United is an iconic club. Spurs as well. I mean, it's they've not won much, but it's always been a high profile football club. Uh, in terms of where they're at, it's two clubs struggling. But I think in terms of how deep the problem is, it's much more acute at Manchester United. I think it's a problem that's been ongoing for a long, long time. So in terms of who perhaps needed the win more, without a shadow of a doubt, it was Manchester United. I think Man United needed that win much more. I think with Spurs, it's a successful business. I think Man United, I'm not sure where it's at the moment in terms of its finances, but it really, really needed a proper reset. I think them winning the champions, the cup would have been a brilliant opportunity for a reset. It would have given Amarin an opportunity to sort of say, right, okay, it allows me to attract better players. I mean, I said that they'll still attract good players because it's Man United, but perhaps finishing or qualifying for the Champions League, it allows them to attract a slightly more superior player. And it, boy, does that club need to invest in some players. So apart from the revenue that it would have got, it would have attracted better players. It would have perhaps strengthened Amarin's hand in terms of going forward, in terms of the negotiations with players. So I just sort of think that this is a catastrophic blow to Amarin. I think what he's shown so far is it's mixed, but it's much more disappointing. I have got to be honest. I expected better. I really expected better from Amarim. I can't really sort of say, well, look, I can see a trajectory which is given me optimism or cause for optimism. I think this is a severe blow. I've got a feeling that it won't last next season. I think they're going to struggle to attract decent players. They've got to offload so much rubbish that exists at Manchester United. I think Ratcliffe still is, even though he's a Man United supporter, he's a Man United fan. I think he's a businessman first and foremost. And like most successful businessmen, there's an element of ruthlessness. He's already shown that ruthless streak, and I don't think he's good for Man United. I really don't think. That's the irony, that a Man United supporter who owns the club is perhaps not the ideal person for that football club.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you end on there. When you say it in those stark terms, it does make you think. And I wonder whether with Amarim, because I think he's a good coach, I just think this could be a case of just really bad timing. Because you know this, if there's been plenty of times when other football clubs at the top of the table have had difficult seasons where they've finished perhaps sixth, seventh, maybe even eighth, as has been the case with Arsenal. I think even Liverpool spent a little bit of time in sixth and seventh and what have you. But normally that still allows you the opportunity or a springboard to get yourselves back into the reckoning because one really good appointment as coach or one really good signing, whether it's at the front end of the field or a good centre back and what have you, suddenly can start to shape up and get in amongst the big boys. The problem they've got is they've got to make multiple leaps to get in amongst the footballing elite within this country. They are nowhere near Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, Villa, Newcastle, just to name a few. Not even Brighton, Brentford having a good season. Let's see what happens with their manager. They're just nowhere near some of these football clubs, whether it's in terms of stability or personnel. And that's why the worry is for me, where you think, I think he's a really good coach. If he'd come into perhaps a team that was, let's say, mid-table, or perhaps where the expectation wasn't as strong, you could see him where he could really punch above his weight, let's say perhaps like an Iraola is doing, and therefore raising his stock that way. You come into Manchester United, there is only one aim and objective, which is to get back to winning the Premier League. And he's spoken about that. He's not shied away from that, so much to his credit. But I just think where and how, given the finances, given that they would have budgeted for European football, given that some of the salaries that those players are earning is of a club that is in Champions League football, that leaves, you and I know, a gap in the accounts. Now, how are they going to bridge that gap? And you wonder whether or not, and there's some talk that it could be as quickly as next week, where Fernandez has to make a decision whether he's going to go to Saudi Arabia. Hilal, I think, are making a big push for him. Do United say, we love him, but this is maybe perhaps a necessary evil? You spoke about that R word, reset, and maybe they have to enforce some sort of reset to bring in some coffers. Now, selling Fernandez, I mean, they've written off next season. I mean, that's just a write off. So you just wonder what's going to happen to that football club. I really question whether or not we're going to see Manchester United back amongst the big time, whether the next 3 or 4 years are just written off because where, how, with who, who's slipping up at the top end, suddenly going to come apart at the seams that United are suddenly going to be able to get and crack in amongst that top six, top eight. So yeah, I'm with you. Catastrophic was the word you used. I think it's appropriate. I don't see a pathway. I don't see an avenue. I don't think most Manchester United fans do. Again, when it's like that, I just don't think it's a case of sacking the manager because I don't think A has been given enough time. B, I don't think he's been given a fair crack in terms of the hand he's been dealt. Yes, he's not done as good as perhaps some would have thought, where you've got to get some wins to give yourself some currency. But it's a new start, it's a new season, you start from zero. And I think he should be given that option. You're right, though, given the way this season has gone, that's definitely meant that if he doesn't come up trumps in the first 12 to 15 games, I think the United faithful will be kind of voting with their feet as well, and maybe with a lot of booing at Old Trafford. So yeah, I'm with you in that regard.
I mean, the problem's really been the decision makers. I mean, I've no idea who are the decision makers at Manchester United, but it's a club that is in it's the decline is it's the stadia as well. I mean, there was lots of comments about sort of leaking roofs, and it is symptomatic of a club that's just been so poorly mismanaged. And I just want to make one final point on this. I think was it yesterday or the day before, a couple of days ago, Napoli won, I think, the Italian league, and their star man this season has been Scott McTominay. Now, I've been a fan of McTominay for a large sort of number of years because
Mm.
he to me epitomised exactly what Man United should be all about. I mean, he's certainly a very, very good player now. I mean, he was always a solid pro, and he perhaps was sort of he was never in the limelight, but he was always somebody that you could rely on. And again, this is where I talk about the decision making. How on earth could you have got rid of a player like McTominay I mean, it was about 25, 26 million. So it wasn't a case of, right, he's £100 million player. So it allows us to recoup or to make money or to have money. It was a signing that, for me, it's the sort of player that you needed at Man United. I think what
Mm.
I would be certainly trying to do at Man United is look, right, let's get rid of as many prima donnas. And I actually consider Fernandez, even though he's a good player, he's to me, he's far too much of a prima donna. He's not a leader. He's not somebody that is old school Man United, Roy Keane, Stevie Bruce, Pallister, these types of characters. That's really what you need to go back to. If Man United are ever going to start climbing the tree again, they've got to look at what made them great. And they always had strong characters. Now, obviously, they had one of the greatest coaches or greatest managers, let me put it that way, that's ever been in Ferguson. So maybe uh, that sort of slightly clouds every conversation you ever have about Man United because you obviously had an iconic leader who was leading the ship. Uh, but I think what they need to do is certainly look at strong characters, and that to me, when I saw McTominay, I mean, the way that he's played for Napoli, the way that he's galvanised that team, obviously under Conte, uh, that perhaps encapsulates how utterly horrific the decision making has been at Man United.
Yeah, agreed. And look, Napoli have won the Serie A title, and McTominay played a huge role in that. So you're absolutely right. I think at least some triumph. I need to double check. But the point I'm making is he's done really well at Napoli. You're right. You talk about characters, and he's the type of player you would think would be perfectly suited if he's coming through the ranks and playing a critical part during what is going to be a difficult set of years, isn't it, Ayub? And that's the problem that you have, where given that you know what's coming up, you want to keep as many good characters as possible. And I hear you about Bruno. I think he's a wonderful player. I think he's done really well this season. And I think his stock's so high right now that Man United might think we need to cash in because
Mm.
this is where we are right now as a football club. You're right. I mean, I just can't see where they go. Honestly, all the kind of analysis in the world and reasoning, what they're going to have to do is have a little bit of luck, understand what they want to be as a football club, how they want to navigate the next 2, 3 years, because they're going to be tough. There's going to be a number of losses still to come because they are so far removed from being an elite level footballing team on the pitch and away from the pitch as well. So there's so much to do, so much to fix. Just switching just back to Spurs, Ayub. What's your view on Ange Postecoglou? Obviously, you mentioned you think he'll stay. I mean, it's obviously a big result for him. He's kept speaking about how he wins a trophy in his second season. He's done it under difficult circumstances. They've had big injuries this season, huge injuries he's had to contend with. Been many games where they've had to put what can be considered very makeshift type 11. Archie Gray's probably played a little bit more than he should have, and other youngsters as well. But he's won the Europa League. Spurs fans will be obviously elated with that. How do you see them fare for next season? Do you think they can use this as a springboard, or do you think some of that has to be tempered, given the struggles that they did have in the league this year?
I think he'll. I mean, it's a huge. I mean, you've got to give credit where it's due. Ultimately, I've always sort of said sports is about winning things, and he's won something, and he's won something at a club that seldom wins any trophies. So obviously, it's a major achievement. I think this will be a wonderful confidence booster as well because he's taken a bit of a battering at the hands of not just the fans but the media as well in terms of how Spurs have performed. But this will be fantastic for him. He's going to be able to attract good players to the club. It's a club that is, I mean, you talked about it. It's a very well run business, Spurs. Even though they don't win much, it's a well run business. They'll have a lot of the injured players back. So I think he'll be fine. I think this was, it's a huge result for him because I'm absolutely certain if they'd have lost, he would have been sacked. This is almost, I mean, I won't sort of say it's quite a sort of return from the dead, but it's very much gives you a feeling of that he almost was dead and buried. He's got a second opportunity, a second chance. This season has been quite an exceptional season in terms of injuries. I think he'll be all right, and I think they'll do all right. I think Spurs is it's a sort of club that I think sort of top six should be their aim, and I think there's absolutely no reason why that shouldn't be a realistic possibility under Ange.
Yeah, let's see. I still think it'll be difficult just because of the competition for those places. And that's a nice little segue. You've just to the final day games. Just very quickly, just to wrap up. Got the final games obviously in a few hours' time. Last day is always a bit of a bonanza. You're right. It's been a bit of an anticlimax. Even last season, obviously, the Premier League went to the final day in terms of the title with City and Arsenal duking it out. I guess the big question is Champions League, a Champions League qualification. Who's going to miss out potentially? I've got one very simple question for you. It's as simple as they come. If Chelsea don't make it into the Champions League, will they be parting ways with their manager?
Absolutely, absolutely, and so they should. So they should because it's a club that's invested heavily, and when you make that sort of investment, there are sort of KPIs, and one of the KPIs is that you have to finish in the Champions League. If you don't do that, I'm afraid you've got to go.
Yeah, agreed. I think it'll be a difficult one just because it's Chelsea. I mean,
Mm,
I would be amazed if they approached it any other way. Again, I don't think it's fair. I don't think any manager should be given one season, uh, especially when you come close. If you fail miserably, I think that's fair enough. But if you've been told, hey, you've got to get Champions League and you take it to the very last game, now you might say, well, this is Chelsea Football Club. But
mm,
the point I'm making is he's at least getting close. He's not mid-table. He's not, kind of 12th or 13th. That's it, fair enough. Even one season, Chelsea at a club like Chelsea, where they don't have any patience anyway, you're gonna be on a sticky wicket, so to speak. And I think they will move on from him. I'm not saying it's the right move, but I just think it's Chelsea, so they will. They always feel as though they can attract the best managers out there, and they'll perhaps already have their eye on somebody. I think it's been a difficult season for him. Started well in terms of some of the style, some of the football, and what have you, but had too many problem areas, goalkeeper, and a few other areas where they've just had many issues in games. Difficult one, Forest. Obviously, Forest fighting for Champions League football as well. So you expect to be a few twists and turns, but look, Chelsea will think it's in our hands.
mm,
If we win, we've got Champions League football. So, difficult one for them. I think they're the story today to keep an eye out on for
mm.
sure. Forest away is a difficult one for them. But yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think there could well be a parting of the ways, perhaps even as early as next week, if in the event that Chelsea don't qualify for Champions League football, because they'll have really seen this as an opportunity, given the investment you said. You're right. You rightly pointed out that the bare minimum they would have been expecting, especially in a year where you get more spots to qualify, that they must take that step. So yeah, time will tell. Interesting one.
And that's the only talking point, really, is the Champions League spot because everything else is has sort of been signed, sealed, and delivered a long time ago. So it's a disappointing sort of finale. But we talked about it on a show before that it's because of the competition, the standard. Has increased. I mean that's the perverse sort of conversation that we're having. That because the standard is so high, perhaps that almost now means that the relegation spots are going to be sort of done and dusted, sort of way before the end of the season. I just hope next season perhaps there's a little bit more drama. Uh, One of the reasons because we're going to be in it, so I'm hoping that it's going to be a little bit more exciting. But this season, it's a bit of an anticlimax. I mean, I've used that word. That phrase before, and it is, as I said, the only thing now is just that little sort of battle for the Champions League spot. So that's enough talk about the EPL. I just want to sort of finish on before we go. There's an interesting story that developed over the last couple of weeks about Gary Lineker and his comments. Now he's always been outspoken. Sometimes uh, his comments have aligned with the establishment. Other times they haven't. Uh, this time it hasn't, and he's commented about what's happening in Palestine at the moment, and he's expressed those views quite a number of times. He posted something or reposted something which had a rat-like figure or a rat, which obviously has certain symbolism. He apologized. He apologized once he realized the error of his ways, but the establishment have gone after him. They've tried to vilify him. He's stuck to his guns to a certain extent, apart from the apology. He was going to, I think, retire officially from the BBC next year by doing the World Cup. But that's been hastened. He's going to do his last match of the day today. A great broadcaster, a figure that I like on the whole because I think his heart's in the right place. But what's your thoughts on this? I mean, sort of Western, sort of, it's always been about Western democracy, about freedom. It always sort of accuses uh, sort of the Middle East or the Far East or this or that nation of not allowing people to express their thoughts and views. Now, obviously, in recent times, it seems that there's a lot of hypocrisy in that. Now, I don't know whether you've any thoughts on Gary Lineker or your thoughts on the whole piece about freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Is it only all right if you go with the establishment? Is that the way that things are?
This is probably a subject that you that requires a lot of time to kind of delve into right now. I'm going to keep it a little bit big picture for the time being. Just very quickly on Gary Lineker first, before I go quick large picture. Gary Lineker was obviously aware that his time at the BBC was coming to an end. He's had a few near scrapes in recent times. You're right, he was going to retire from the BBC officially after the World Cup next summer. That's obviously been hastened with this particular incident. And obviously, there's been a great deal of pressure on the BBC to make Gary Lineker, or to perhaps, not saying force him to resign, but make his position untenable to the point where he's decided that he's going to end his association with the BBC. I think he's been presenting that show for the best part of 26 years. But tonight will be his last match of the day show and his last I guess, recording with or official day with the BBC, let's say. Now, for sure, he'll be there at the World Cup in some capacity, you would imagine, because he is, in a lot of ways, an iconic figure. So he'll be there. He's a great presenter. I don't think anybody disputes that. So he'll be there in some capacity, most likely for some American broadcaster, you would imagine. So he'll be there featuring the World Cup, and it's a good gig, and it'll be one that pays well. So he'll be there. In terms of large picture, I don't want to go on about it too much. I think we both speak privately about some of the things that go on. There's a great deal of disenchantment right now about the set of circumstances and incident that Gary Lineker posted, I think, on his Instagram or whatever it was, or reposted, I should say, this kind of anti-Semitic post or whatever as it was interpreted. Um, and there's a lot of uh, feeling towards that, a lot of strong feeling towards that. It's an issue that often makes you pick sides, let's say, because you see a certain level of unfairness in the way that it's transpiring, the events. And the issue and the main crux of the matter right now is there's a lot of disenchantment with certain communities and certain fraternities when you're having to evaluate what's happening there in the Middle East right now. And there's a lot of disenchantment because of, to your point, the hypocritical and the hypocrisy that you see with regards to how this particular set of circumstances is being evaluated in terms of the lack of pressure on one particular side and what is essentially, unfortunately, a great deal of torture and suffering that's taking place on the other side. Now, you'll have seen in very recent days a slight shifting in tone, but from my perspective, are you too little too late? Because the fact of the matter is, too many people have lost their lives, too many lineages and generations have been destroyed. What good is it for a kid who might be 18 months old, 24 months old, who doesn't now have any parents or grandparents or siblings to speak of? What life do you think is uh, in awaiting, let's say, for that particular child? So the fact that so much has happened in this particular part of the world and that it's been so polarizing to some extent. Again, there's a lot of disenchantment with people because only now there's suddenly a little shift in tone. Well, a little shift in tone is not enough. These are just platitudes, words presented at the dispatch box at the House of Commons. That doesn't really do anything. What needed to be done was a proactive measure at the time to avoid unnecessary killing and unnecessary lives being lost. And that's the reason why it's evoking so much emotion. Now, if you take Gary Lineker at his word for it, clearly he feels some way about it. He gave an interview to Mediasan not so long ago on Zateo where he spoke about this. He said, look, I think to use his words, he said, I've got no skin in the game. He's not Muslim, he's not Jewish, but I see the videos, and what can I say? I've never seen anything as abhorrent and as uh, difficult in his entire life. His words, not mine. So the problem you've got is there's certain powers and there's certain forces at work here that mean that if you put your head above the parapet and voice your opinion in certain forums, then for sure you're going to have to face the consequences. This is life in 2025 in certain countries, wherever it may be. So you're either silenced, where you just don't say anything, maybe only to friends and family in certain forums, or the moment you try and actually influence positive change to avoid simply unnecessary evil and suffering, you're suddenly kind of quote unquote cancelled or minimized or marginalized, whether it's on social media forums or what have you. So it's a much broader topic. You and I probably can't do it justice in a very short time, but very just to summarize, Gary Lineker has paid the price essentially for reposting something that ultimately there's a certain influential group of people that don't like this type of thing. Now, the BBC have invoked new rules about impartiality and all the rest of it, and blah blah blah. So, to some extent, when you're signing a BBC contract, you kind of know what you get. Now, okay, cool. My own personal views, I have to kind of keep to myself. Gary Lineker's probably thinking I'm leaving anyway, so I might as well. And I think that's the view he took. So, in terms of his larger point, I think that's something for another day, another forum, and what have you. But the reason why this happens is because people have certain feelings and certain values. Most normal people are human beings with a great deal of affinity towards their fellow human being and understand that everyone deserves to live a certain type of life and what have you. And what's happening right now in certain parts of the world, the moment it stops affecting you, is the day we have a real problem, and that's the issue. So the fact that certain influential people can still voice their opinions and perhaps influence some change in some little way, I think is positive in the world. So I'll probably leave it at that for the time being. Are you?
I mean, you sort of, for me, talked about exactly what I would want from influential figures. I mean, it's about sort of being on the right side of history. This is not just uh, aligning yourself to something that's happening that's popular. I mean, this is, in a sense, it's a strange one. There's a strange dichotomy to this, that the popular point of view is very much in support of what's happening to the Palestinians. And there is no doubt in my mind there is a genocide. And obviously, the powers that be, or those who are obviously very influential in the world, have countered that. But it's easy for Gary Lineker to stay quiet. And I think I have a huge amount of admiration for people who are in the public eye. Now, they could just so easily, not as you put it, put their head above the parapet, uh, make a comment which could be seen to be damaging to their career. Which in this case, I mean, you could turn around and say it's damaging to his career. I don't think it is. I think it's something that will uh, and it has drawn a huge amount of admiration to Gary Lineker. There's obviously lots of criticism as well, but I think in terms of the overall perception that he he is held in now, the vast majority of people are on the side of the Palestinians, because I mean it's always, I mean, it's this asymmetrical. I mean, they call it a war. It's never been a war. I mean, I used it on social media. There was a post that I posted. It's like having some guy 6'6" beating up a 3-year-old and saying it's a fight. It's never been a war. This is something that really, this is the most grotesque thing that's ever happened in my lifetime, your lifetime, in many people's lifetime, unless you're about 80, 90, 100 years old, where perhaps you were around in the Second World War. To not make a comment and to not have a view on this, and to me, there is only one view. And that's the right view. The right view is to be supportive of the Palestinians. What's happening is it's an abomination to humanity. And I think what Gary Lineker has done, and he's one of very few celebrities to have done this. He's obviously expressed his view. He's certainly sided on, in my opinion, the right side. It's I would I'm not going to say it's cost him his career at the BBC, because he only had a little bit of work left. But I have a huge amount of respect for him. I think he will go down as one of the greatest broadcasters at the BBC, and he has been fabulous as a broadcaster. And you're absolutely right. The demand for his services. I don't think probably it will be an American broadcaster because they're very much supportive of Zionism. So therefore, I think it will be difficult for him. Uh, BN Sports, they're always looking for broadcasters. I think he's in a position where he can pick and choose, and I think he's got a very moral position. I think he will choose a broadcaster that obviously fits in with perhaps his particular uh, philosophy on obviously what he stands for. But I just sort of think that this is a very sad episode for the BBC, and it's been to me a broadcaster that's absolutely shamed itself. And in one way, I'm happy that Gary Lineker will no longer be working for the BBC because I think it's a strange marriage between a guy who's got a lot of principles and who speaks his mind, and he's a voice for the voiceless. That's the key, because Palestinians don't have a voice, and Gary Lineker is using his influence, his platform, to be a voice for a community that is absolutely being decimated. So I think kudos to Gary Lineker. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and he will be. The BBC's loss will be a gain for somebody. So that's my final view on Mr. Lineker.
Yeah, just very quickly, you see it on both sides of the pond, by the way. If you follow some of the American commentators, those who have started to share some of their views based on essentially what their eyes are telling them. They see certain things and they can call it for what it is. And you see them, again, I'll probably name just one, but I'm sure you follow her as well, Candace Owens, for years,
Mm,
a big
yeah,
supporter of, let's say, the other side, and suddenly finds herself uh, targeted and marginalized. Now, she's a great voice, to be fair, in terms of her following. I would say she's probably top five when it comes to uh, kind of social media kind of influences in regards to this particular space amongst the masses. So the fact that she's speaking that as she is, she's able to do so now because ultimately she's got an independent platform. So, yeah, you see it on both sides of the pond. And I think actually Gary Lineker, just very to finish off quickly, I don't want to go on about it too much. I think we need to wrap up quickly. But I think this is also, you talk about generally the gatekeepers of media, the gatekeepers of information in history in terms of the main media channels, the main publications, etc. Um, I think generally now people have more control and autonomy about the information that they are sharing. They have podcasts, they have their own platforms, whatever they may be. So I think that's also, you see that more and more where with influencers saying, well, actually, I don't need to be on news at 10 or CNN or whatever it might be to share the views that I want to share. It's ultimately I can grow my own following, and that means I have full editorial control, let's say, in terms of what's being shared. You'll see that, I think, now over time with Gary Lineker as well. He'll have his own show. He's got a few little podcasts, but no doubt he'll have something lined up where he can perhaps talk about this more and more if it's something that he feels strongly about. So it also shows you a little bit of a shift between what is essentially renowned as historically the mainstream, let's say, and
mm,
now you see it in sports, sportsmen, but also now people in politics, art, musicians, whatever it may be, taking more control of the information that's being shared from their side. So I would say that's encouraging, let's say, but for sure there'll be some pitfalls among the way when you again make certain comments that certain influential lobbies, let's say, may not like.
absolutely. Right. And on that note, on that depressing note, we'll call it a day. So it's the end of the season. It's been a it's been a I don't know, not the best of season in terms of drama excitement, but it's been a pretty decent season for me, certainly. My team has won promotion, the Arsenal perhaps.
Listen,
Not so much.
you say that, but the ladies won Champions League yesterday, Champions League final against Barcelona. So come on, hey, it's
Yeah, I'm surprised
2025.
you've not made a
It's,
comment, but obviously you have made a comment
yeah,
now.
exactly. It's 2025. Are you? Come on, equality and all that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely right. So on that note, now we'll obviously we'll sort of carry on shooting, and we'll probably do a review and perhaps like sort of the best moments or best teams or best players. So we'll do something over the next few weeks once the season sort of finishes. But In terms of the audience and the viewers who've obviously watched on a regular basis, thank you so much. It really is so much appreciated. As I said, when me and Owen started this, it wasn't always about trying to get as many views. It was trying to bring some sort of content which provided some sort of enjoyment, some sort of interest. We appreciate the viewers that watch on a regular basis. We appreciate those who put comments in. So thank you so much. Hopefully you can join us in future episodes as well. So put your comments in for whatever on any of the subjects that we talked about. But my thanks, heartfelt thanks, for joining us and watching us and supporting us. It's appreciated. So until the next time, take care of yourself, enjoy yourself. See you soon.